Hello, and thanks for joining us here on Encore. Coming up on today's show, his guitar riffs have scored the pop soundtrack of the last 35 years. Johnny Marr is a musician's musician, sought after as a guest artist, band member and solo singer-songwriter after his legendary stint in the Smiths. On tour with his latest album called Comet, he's here in the studio to tell us more about taking centre stage after years as an ensemble player. Johnny Marr, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, you're on tour in Europe now with music from your latest record called Comet. That's your third solo album. And as someone who's played in a lot of bands, how are you finding it being a frontman, being centre stage?
It's exciting. It's interesting. I made my first solo record in 2012, and I kind of took to it fairly easily in a way, really, because I've had a lot of experience of other singers, other frontmen, Chrissie Hynde in the Pretenders, and Matt Johnson and the Morrissey and the Smiths, of course. So I've kind of learnt from the best, really. But also, it was something that I used to do before the Smiths when I was 16, 17, 15, I started. And I was always pushed to the front back then. But when I got to form the Smiths, I really wanted to be an expert at being the guitar player. So I stopped writing. I didn't write lyrics so much then, or sing. So when I came to do it again in 2012, it was a long time since, being a teenager. In a way, I kind of picked up from where I left off. I had a sort of memory of how to do it, and also then a bravado kind of kicked in, some kind of false bravado that seemed to have worked, really.
Well, I think you have the credentials for it. Now let's hear a little from that new album. This is Hi Hello from Call the Comet. Now, you've talked about one of the tracks on that album as being inspired by the current resident of the White House. I'm thinking it might be a little bit of a political record. How do you think that the relationship is at the moment between music and politics?
Well, it's an interesting question because I'm often asked whether artists have a responsibility to address social issues and specifically politics. I don't think artists have a responsibility unless they have their own sort of motivation or social awareness. I come from a generation in the early 80s that, because of the political situation with, in our case it was the Thatcher era in America, Reaganomics, that we were very politically informed, and it felt there was a lot of very intense domestic situation with unemployment and those things. I think, 30 years later, it's a very, very different world. And but so I'm asked about that because I come from that sort of generation. The truth of my new record was that I actually, almost as an act of defiance, deliberately decided that it isn't a political record. There's one song on the album that is, I couldn't resist having a pop, which is called Bug. And that the concept of that song is that the rise of the right-wing ideology, to my thinking, is like a virus that is affecting and infecting the nervous system of the world. So I wrote a song called Bug, which is like a virus. But I married it to an upbeat kind of funk sort of club track. I didn't want it to be all too pompous and too downbeat. even though I understand it's a very serious subject. But my record, I managed to, I decided that on the new Call the Comet album that the figures in the political scene didn't deserve to be in my songs. And they didn't deserve to be in my head for a year, and I don't want them in my audience's head when they listen to the record. So I managed to sing about society, a society in my imagination, like an alternative society. So there's a few tracks on the album that is about an idealised society, like a utopia in a way, something a bit more positive, because I don't think those people, I don't want them contaminating my creativity, and I don't really want them to be living in my songs at the moment. Maybe in the future I'll write some more political songs, and in the past I've written political songs, but it felt like almost like an act of defiance to remember that because I'm a creative person and I'm a rock musician, I escape into playing the guitar and singing with my band, and I want my audience to almost escape through rock music in listening to this record, not to pretend that everything is okay, because everything isn't okay, but I just don't want them contaminating my music.
Okay, so that is a deliberate choice. Now, you mentioned the guitar. You're infamous for your skills on the guitar, and Fender even named one of their models after you. Can you tell us how you came to the instrument as a kid and how it became this extension of you in a way?
Yeah, sure. Well, I had this really crazy obsession about the guitar from being a very little boy, from being 5. The first obsession I had was this little wooden guitar in the shop that sold mops and buckets. Haberdasher, is it?
Yeah.
Mops and buckets, this little wooden guitar. I have no idea why. And so I had to have that. And then I used to carry that little toy around like my friends would carry around a fire engine, and a friend would carry around a football. Well, I just have this little guitar. And then every year, every Christmas, every birthday, my parents would get me a slightly bigger guitar, until I was able to, around about 8 or 9, I was able to start learning to write songs on it. And I've not really ever stopped, you know. And then, so in 2011, Fender invited me to make this Fender Jaguar with my name on it. And I took the guitar and I redesigned it to make it what I think is perfect. So it's a really prestigious thing. It's a real honour. I'm very grateful to have that opportunity.
I'm sure they're honoured too. Now, we're going to play you something that should sound a little bit familiar. So that opening of Charming Man, your guitar riff there, is often cited as one of the best ever. For you, though, in your career, what riff are you most proud of?
How Soon Is Now by the Smiths. The reason I'm proud of it is because I think most people who know rock music, you only need to hear the first 5 seconds of it, and you know what it is or who it is, you know. And those things are they're very rare, you know, to have a signature. I've been very lucky that you know, I've managed to find a few of them over my career. But I would still make sure that all my songs start with a guitar. So the singer has to wait. Make the singer wait.
It is your signature.
So, yeah.
Now, speaking of your collaborations over the last 30 years, it's like a who's who of anyone who in pop. Paul McCartney, The Pretenders, Kirsty MacColl, Talking Heads, and more recently you're a member of Modest Mouse and The Cribs. Obviously, plenty of people wanted to work with you, but what about your criteria when you're looking at a creative collaboration? What does there have to be for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I like to probably look at someone I haven't worked with before. So recently I did a track with the UK actress Maxine Peake, who is a really fantastic, amazing actor. And that Maxine is not only a lovely person, a great actress, but I thought it was an unusual idea, and it takes the world of theatre into music, and her sensibilities are very different from working with a regular rock musician. So I like that it was not expected, but still made sense. You know, people were quite surprised by it, but also liked it. And I guess You know what? Mostly it's someone that I think I can learn from. So working with Hans Zimmer on movie soundtracks, you know, I get to, you know, when I made the soundtrack to Inception, I got to work with the director Christopher Nolan, and that was really interesting, just being around someone who's got a very, very high standard, but is not from the music world. And so Hans, I still think I'm learning quite a lot from Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, it's certainly a different universe.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the beginning of your career, obviously your success really exploded with the Smiths, and they were around for a relatively short period of time, but they've become mythical. The legacy is huge. You wrote your autobiography recently called Set the Boy Free and revisited that history. For you, what was the most important thing to set the record straight on?
I actually think the most important thing was not me leaving the Smiths or court cases or drug busts or anything like that. It was explaining my motivation for being in different bands and my inspiration for playing with Modest Mouse and playing with The for 5 years, playing with Brian Ferry, Pet Shop Boys, because on the outside, people don't really understand the actual way those things happened. And quite often, those things happen by accident. It seems like from the outside, it could often look like some genius career strategy or some kind of clever career path. But quite often, it's you meet somebody and in one night you write a hit, which is what happened with Modest Mouse. And you then form a bond with people, like with the Cribs or and like a brotherhood in a way, so people would not know how I managed to be in that situation. And then also, great thing about writing your own book is that you get to pay tribute to some people who maybe haven't had enough praise, like people like Kirsty MacColl, you know. People who have really touched my life, who, with not only their friendship, but also their words and their singing and stuff like that. And those were the bits that were very easy to write because you have this really beautiful sense of tribute. So that's a nice thing, to pay tribute to some of the mavericks, you know. That you,
and a way, a way of taking centre stage. Again, thank you so much, Johnny Marr, for joining us today. We'll leave you with a track from the new album. This is The Tracers. Remember to check out our website for more arts and culture, and you can also keep up with Encore on social media too. There's more news coming up on France 24 in just a moment. Streams of silver and gold, like the comet riding so far. Come with me, evaporate. Traces of comfort, oh yeah. They come to corners, oh yeah. Traces, they know we've lost the way.